college football enthusiasts. This is our Week 3 review, our second episode, and then we're going to preview our thoughts for Week 4. So, to start out the week, there was multiple ranked blowouts. I mean, State won big, Michigan won big. I mean, they weren't playing like great opponents, but I mean, most of these big schools won pretty big.
Yeah, I think the one that kind of stands out to me was that Penn State Auburn game.
Yeah,
I watched that, and I was, I try to root for the Big Ten for the most part when they play other schools or other conferences, and I picked them to win that game, but I did not see the game going like that. To go into Auburn and out physical an SEC team like that was a pretty big statement win.
I watched some of that too, and I mean, it didn't even look like a game. I know Auburn's not as strong as what they've been, but that was still like impressive what they did on the road in SEC.
Yeah.
And so to go on with that, Penn State's ranked at 14 this week. I think they should be a little higher than that, more like a 12 or even 11, personally. I mean, they had a good game with Purdue, but I mean, other than that, they've done pretty well in their non-conference games, especially with Auburn, as we talked about. But
I agree with that. And when we get to our top 10, I think my top 10 will reflect that. That was an impressive win. They completely deflated a pretty big name brand Power 5 team on the road. Jordan-Hare Stadium was like emptying in the third quarter.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. The one weakness, I think, of Penn State from last year was the running game, and they just ran all over Auburn at will. I like their Penn State's quarterback. I don't think he's going to win you any games, but he's pretty athletic, and I think Penn State at 14 is. I think they should be higher.
Yeah.
A lower number there. And I think they're going to continue to move up too, if they continue to play like that. And it's setting up some Big Ten games too, because that should set up some good matchups later in the year.
So Michigan obviously has had a very weak non-conference. They played UConn, I think Akron, right, or one of the MAC schools. They just haven't had very tough competition. I think they're a little bit too. I think they're overrated right now. Personally, like everyone's boasting about them, talking about them in the top 5. I don't think they deserve to be there quite yet. Maybe as conference play goes on, but not yet.
That's a hard one to judge. I think the Michigan team looks good, but their strength of schedule is like one of the worst in the country, like you said. And one of their games was Hawaii, and Vanderbilt, which is not really a football powerhouse, right? Vanderbilt beat Hawaii by more points than Michigan beat Hawaii, and Vanderbilt's probably one of the worst teams in the SEC.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take anything away from Michigan. I think they're a good team, but we don't know anything about them yet because their schedule is so weak at this point. And to give them credit, they look like a good team, and they're doing what good teams should do against bad teams.
Yeah.
So I'll give Michigan credit there. They're not like inching out wins against teams they have no business, being close with. So I think we don't know a whole lot about them yet, and that's going to be one of those stories that develops. They're top 5. I think they're 4 right now. Mm-hmm. So as the season goes, are they a real contender? Is there more than one power in the Big Ten again, or is it a one-man race?
So going on with the conference play, it starts this week for most schools outside of probably like Purdue. Most schools do start conference play this week. And so one of my upsets for that is I have Wake Forest over Clemson. I don't know if they're going to win, but I at least think Wake Forest would lose by less than 7. The spread's 7.5 in favor of Clemson, so I think they're at least going to cover their end. I also think the Oregon-Washington State game will be interesting since Washington State did beat Wisconsin. I don't know. I think that'll be interesting after Oregon's game last week. I mean, they pretty much manhandled BYU.
They did. I picked BYU to win that game outright, and seeing I thought Georgia's a good team, and they absolutely obliterated Oregon. But I thought Oregon would maybe be a little bit better against BYU, but I thought BYU would win, and they got bullied big time. So that's a good pick. One of the conference games I'm really excited about is Tennessee-Florida.
Yeah, that one I feel like will be a good game as well.
I think Florida's way overrated too at this point. And Tennessee, if you look at the stats of quarterbacks and stuff like that, Tennessee's quarterback looks really good this year. And it's been a long time since Tennessee has been anything of importance in the SEC. So I'm looking forward to that game. I got that one circled on my watch list for this weekend. Wisconsin, Ohio State, Big Ten conference play. Oklahoma State, K-State. That game's been crazy the last 3 years.
Yeah.
A couple upsets when Oklahoma was top 5 in the country. So that could be an interesting one. I'm not bold enough to call for a K-State upset there. I think Oklahoma's really good, and that'll be reflected in my top 5 as well. I would not be shocked if Clemson loses against Wake. Clemson is overrated. Their quarterback play is atrocious.
Their offense is really not very good.
They're supposed to have like a top 10 defense, and the thought was if their quarterback developed and they could improve, then they would be a very good team, and they have not taken those strides. I don't understand. DJ Ungalele is their quarterback, and I don't understand what Dabo's obsession is with not like pulling him.
Yeah, I figured they would have pulled him by now. I'm sure it'll come eventually, but as of now, it's not happened yet. But
that's a weak conference. It's easily winnable for Clemson, and if they mess around and keep this guy in, then they maybe trip up and underperform. So,
so to move on from that, we're going to go to our team, our favorite teams, like the results. So Purdue lost by 3. I mean, outside of the referee issues that might have been happening, I mean, it's still bad decisions. You score with 51 seconds left, and then you start pressing with man coverage with I think 12 seconds left. You don't have any prevent defense, so that game should have been easily winnable, and they kind of blew it. Ohio State took care of business, didn't they?
Yeah, they weren't really expected to compete against, or Toledo wasn't really expected to compete against Ohio State. Toledo had one of the best defenses in the country going into that, but it's so early in the year and the competition that you play and stuff like that. Ohio State's defense is not necessarily taking the strides that I hoped it would have at this point. It's kind of like the opposite side of what Michigan's doing. Michigan's playing bad teams and taking care of business, and Toledo kind of hung around in that game a little more than I think they should have. Now, Ohio State's offense, C.J. Stroud looked incredible in that game.
I saw a little bit of that. He looked pretty good.
So their offense is clicking, and their defense needs to improve. But this week, Ohio State has Wisconsin at home. Ohio State's they don't have a lot of difficult road games this year, so playing Wisconsin at home is kind of a good one. Wisconsin's probably one of the favorites in the Big Ten West, so that should be a good game. Ohio State's wearing all blackout uniforms and stuff, so it should be a good atmosphere. I expect them to win. I was kind of surprised at the meltdown that Purdue had.
Yeah.
To their credit, Purdue's coach really owned it at the end of the game, and he could have blamed the refs, and he could have, went on a tirade, and he owned it, and he did the right thing. But if you're Purdue, you got to win that game. You lost a couple close games now.
Yeah.
That really Purdue should probably be 3-0. You know. And it's the schedule only gets more difficult from here. So.
Yeah, if they don't, I mean, I think they'll respond this week, but after this week, it's really serious. Yeah, go to Minnesota, go to Maryland, and I think you have Wisconsin at home maybe. Mm-hmm. But even then, that's a pretty tough stretch right there. I think they're favored to win by 19.5 at least. So I think they'll definitely cover their spread. But I mean, I just hope they come out and respond. No unsportsmanlike conduct penalties or anything. Like that.
That's one of the things you want to see when you play lesser competition is a clean game and try to make marginal improvements. And if they can keep penalties down and maybe they can get their heads right, because I think they might be teetering. If they have some penalties this game, they don't do good, then they could kind of spiral out and nosedive for the season. So you got to be careful. Yeah,
I think this is a very important game. Last week was important too. I feel like they took care of business last week. This game wouldn't be as important, but since it kind of slipped at the end, it's kind of a big deal now. It is their homecoming. It is a night game, which is pretty rare for Purdue, but hopefully they take care of business. Another thing I want to talk about is the Blue Bloods of basketball. So Kansas is undefeated, Duke's undefeated, IU's also 3-0. I mean, it's just kind of crazy that these predominantly basketball schools are now doing decent in football.
I really like the Duke and the Kansas aspect of it. That kind of caught my attention. And you wonder how ESPN is not going to that game. College Game Day is not going to that. I think they're at the Tennessee game, Tennessee, Florida, which is a big game, don't get me wrong. But you got two schools who hardly ever see game day. They're 3-0. Kansas sold out for the first time in years for this game. And that would have been really cool for those students and those fans. And it's not always about the big programs. Tennessee's a big draw. I understand that. They have one of the biggest stadiums in the country. But I think it would have been cool to kind of highlight, an early success. And I don't think really anyone expects Kansas to do anything. They're favored in that game, which is kind of surprising. I don't think anyone's going to pick Kansas to win the Big 12 this year. But.
Yeah. I mean, they did beat Houston and Western, like they've had some decent wins.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I think the rest of that conference is pretty strong. I mean, you got Oklahoma State,
Mm-hmm.
Baylor. I mean, I don't know if they're going to be able to knock off those people, but it'll be nice to see, I guess. So if you want to end with this, we can end with the rankings.
Sure.
So for my number 1 team, I have Georgia, and then number 2, Ohio State. I have Bama at 3, USC at 4, Oklahoma at 5, Michigan at 6, Clemson at 7, Kentucky at 8, Oklahoma State at 9, and then Arkansas at 10. I almost put Penn State in that 10 spot, but I think Arkansas's quarterback plays pretty well. I mean, he's a pretty good dual threat guy, but.
Yeah, I have Arkansas in mine as well, and I have Arkansas as my upset for this week. So Arkansas is number 10 in the country. They're playing at Texas A&M. A&M's ranked 23rd currently, and A&M's favored.
Yeah,
so
that surprised me personally, but
I have Arkansas as my upset of the week, and then a lot of our top 10 looks very similar. So Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama at 1 through 3. We're consistent at, and then I have a gap because I think the gap between like the top 3 teams in the country and like 4 through, honestly, I think 4 through probably 10 could beat
anybody,
on any given week. But you get up to 1, 2, and 3, and I think they're definitely a step above. I have Ohio State 2 just because Alabama had a poor performance, and I think Georgia's distinguished themselves as the number 1 team in the country right now, and Ohio State and Alabama are going to continue to flip flop probably the rest of the year.
Yeah.
My number 4 team is Oklahoma, though. I've been really impressed with what Brett Venables is doing out there year 1. They have a transfer quarterback. Their defense looks good. They're playing physical. This K-State game is probably circled because, again, they've been knocked off a few times recently, so it's maybe like a trap game for them. I have Penn State up at number 5 on mine. I know that's a leap for some people. I think they're like 14 in like the national polls right now. Penn State really showed me something. Their weaknesses coming into this year were the running game. Their defense, I think, is a top 10 defense in the country. And if they can run the ball like they could last week, their quarterback's not a game changer. But if they can run the ball like they did last week, he doesn't have to be. Their defense forces turnovers. They're aggressive. They're fast. I'm really impressed with Penn State. And to me, a lot of this is, I have Michigan at 6, for example. Michigan just hasn't played anyone.
Yeah.
Like, to me, Penn State has a better win than Michigan. So I'm gonna move Penn State above Michigan there. So starting at 1, I have Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama at 3, Oklahoma at 4, Penn State at 5, Michigan and Clemson at 6 and 7, and then USC, Tennessee, and Arkansas finish out my top 10. I think Clemson and Michigan are kind of interchangeable there at 6 and 7.
Yeah.
We don't know a whole lot about either of them, and Michigan probably has better quarterback play, so I kind of gave them the nod. USC's defense is suspect. Their offense looks like they're world beaters out there, but Pac-12 is weak, and if they continue to win, they'll move up. Tennessee, I've been really impressed with, especially quarterback play. Offenses dominate college football now. If you have a good quarterback, and Tennessee's quarterback is going to be an NFL prospect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you have a good quarterback, then you're going to be in a game. I expect Tennessee to beat Florida this week. And then Arkansas, I have at number 10, so the SEC getting some representation in there. So we have some similar things on here. It's hard. I think once you get past, I had a hard time past 5 ranking teams. Because really, well, maybe even after 3, because it's a mess at that point. And I know there's a lot of, like in the national polls, for example, Michigan State is ranked higher than Washington, and Washington just beat them.
Yeah.
So I don't really think the national polls have it very good either, especially when you get outside that top 10.
Yeah, the SEC is just really strong this year, like top to bottom. I mean, for me, it's like there's so many SEC teams that are ranked in the top 25. It is hard to tell because we're still non-conference play. But conference play, I think, will start to kind of like show some of the weaknesses and flaws of some teams, and will like show how strong teams really are compared to what they're viewed as now. But I don't have anything else. You have anything else?
No, I think it's. I think some people maybe are sleeping on this weekend. Maybe there's not like any like huge marquee games, but it's a good week for college football.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on it. I think there'll be some good games.
All right, so this is our Week 4 preview, and we'll see you next week. Good afternoon.